Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're opening up a huge stack of source analysis that suggests something. Well, something seismic happened in 2025.
Hmm.
The idea is that the global insiders, the quiet power brokers, who've basically been pulling the geopolitical strings for 30 years,
They just lost the
they
game.
just lost the game. Our sources are framing this as the end of a hidden era.
It really was. It was like a giant game of chess being played just out of sight. And that old team, the one that was winning what our sources are calling the centrist globalist network. I mean, you're
Right.
talking about former leaders like Bill Clinton and Tony Blair, huge Wall Street figures, powerful Israeli security veterans,
The whole establishment,
the
really.
whole establishment. And their power was all based on these opaque foundations, these private meetings, very carefully managed access. They were, masters of the shadows.
And the thesis here, it's huge. 2025 is the pivot point. It's the year that old guard just rapidly started losing its grip.
Yeah.
And it's because their methods, their money, their entire network was exposed.
And a new team is taking over.
A new team, much louder, much more nationalist. We're talking about leaders like Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS.
Right. And they're not doing deals in private mansions.
No, they're operating through blunt, overt state power, public deals.
So our mission today is really to understand that transition. We're going to analyze the sources that sort of map out this power shift across three seemingly unconnected arenas.
Okay.
We've got high-level geopolitics, the dismantling of this key sanctuary in Latin America, and then a really shocking political upset right in New York City. We're trying to find the thread that connects them all.
And what's so crucial for you to understand, according to the analysts we're diving into, is that the key to this whole thing isn't some abstract theory.
No.
It's the Jeffrey Epstein files. Those court documents, the ones that kept unsealing into 2025, they weren't just a scandal. They acted like a geopolitical X-ray.
That's a great way to put it.
They laid bare the exact people, the specific money flows, the whole operational style of this network that is now, visibly crumbling. The private became public.
Okay.
And that opacity
Their greatest strength.
became their fatal weakness.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's really try to define these two competing networks our sources lay out. The losing side is this centrist globalist network.
Right.
And they were on the rise since, the end of the Cold War?
Yeah.
Peaking probably between 1990 and 2020.
And the list of core nodes is, it's a who's who of global influence. You've obviously got Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell acting as these key access brokers.
Absolutely. But then there's former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, the disgraced royal Prince Andrew, financial heavy hitters like Larry Summers.
An entire Clinton Foundation circle.
The whole circle. Peter Mandelson in the UK. It was a cohesive, self-referential group.
And their style of operating was very specific.
Incredibly specific, and it relied heavily on what the sources call compromat-enabled access brokerage.
Which sounds sinister.
It is. It's essentially using the management of reputation, providing discrete services, and the threat of exposing damaging information to secure access and influence for their members.
But it's not just blackmail, is it? It was also about managing hidden money.
Oh, absolutely. Funneling it through seemingly harmless things like academic exchanges or what they called track 2 diplomacy.
Which gave them this non-governmental access to heads of state.
Precisely. The power flowed through this very specialized New York, London, Tel Aviv circuit. It was all about private solutions outside of any formal government oversight.
Okay, so contrast that with the winners, the Nationalist Populist Counter Network.
A completely different animal. This is the group that really solidified its power after 2016 and basically hit critical mass in 2025.
The core nodes here are Trump, a really powerful faction around Netanyahu, especially post-2018 Jared Kushner, MBS.
And importantly, they're willing to engage with figures that were previously, completely untouchable, like Syria's Ahmed al-Sharaa.
Wait, hang on. You're putting Ahmed al-Sharaa, the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham,
ASGS.
which is a designated terror organization.
Yeah.
You're putting him in the same list as Trump and MBS. The sources say that.
They do, because the audacity is the strategy. Their operational style is a total inversion of the old guards. They reject all that finesse.
So no more track 2 diplomacy.
None. They rely on public summits, direct, massive state-to-state deals, the huge Saudi defense packages, the Abraham Accords, and they're completely willing to normalize a former enemy if it serves their interests.
All about sovereign state power, not private influence.
Exactly. And this is where that Epstein connection gets really, really interesting. Because the source material from those 2024 and 2025 document releases, it shows this old network was actively working against the nationalists.
With money and rhetoric?
Absolutely. The documents show Epstein wasn't just some scandal figure. He was an integral intelligence-adjacent broker for a specific Israeli political faction.
And this faction was hostile to both Netanyahu and Trump.
Explicitly. There's a 2017 email chain. In it, Epstein calls Trump borderline insane, and he's discussing with an unnamed Israeli contact the urgent need to contain the damage of Trump's victory for something he calls the project.
Wow, the project. And it wasn't just talk.
No. The documents show Epstein's role in funneling serious cash during that critical April 2019 Israeli election, something like $4 to $6 million.
Where did that money come from?
From financier Leon Botstein and an unnamed European industrialist family, and it went directly into entities that were linked to Ehud Barak.
So that was direct financial intervention to try and defeat Netanyahu.
That's what the sources argue. And what's fascinating is the old network's strength was that this money trail was always invisible. The moment it was exposed, that financial lifeline was just neutralized, gone.
And that exposure removed their veto power over Israeli politics.
Exactly. And once that veto crumbled, the sources say the new guard felt empowered to start applying their state power everywhere else.
Which brings us to the geopolitical consequences. So where did they apply that leverage first? The sources point south. To Venezuela.
Venezuela under Nicolás Maduro is the perfect example of how the old system worked. It was one of these geopolitical safe havens for adversaries.
I mean, for countries like Iran, Russia, Cuba.
The whole axis. From 2013 to 2020, Caracas was their critical offshore hub. These were actors the centrist globalist network preferred to sort of manage, with sanctions and diplomacy, not dismantle.
And what made Venezuela such a sanctuary for them?
Well, you're talking about specific things. Iranian oil laundering operations to fund Hezbollah. You had Russian Wagner units guarding Venezuelan gold mines.
And Cuban intelligence, right?
Deeply embedded. Cuban G2 officers were inside the Venezuelan counterintelligence service, SEBIN. It was a well-defended anti-U.S. outpost.
But the sources say that in the first half of 2025, that all changed.
It was the southern extension of this global realignment. The Trump administration signaled that this sanctuary was now completely unacceptable. They weren't going to manage it. They were going to dismantle it.
And the escalation was fast.
Very fast. They froze accounts. They recognized the opposition leader, Edmundo Gonzalez. And then, the big one, they imposed an effective embargo on Venezuelan oil.
Which just collapsed their revenue.
Completely. It choked off the last $3 billion or so a year the regime was running on, just cut the financial oxygen.
And then they took it a step further.
They did. The real signal was the kinetic action in May 2025. The U.S. Navy intercepted a PDVSA tanker, that's the state oil company, under some new counter-narcotics authority. The goal wasn't containment anymore. It was dismantling a key financial lifeline for the entire Iran-Hezbollah-Russia complex in our hemisphere.
So they're using hard state power for immediate results,
Yeah.
bypassing all that old quiet diplomacy.
Right. And if you connect that back to the Middle East, you see the exact same pattern. The old guard is just being systematically sidelined. Ehud Barak, who used to have unrivaled access.
Can't get a meeting in Washington now?
Reportedly no, because his network, the one that funded him, is compromised. It's exposed.
Meanwhile, the new guard is pushing forward with these huge, very public state deals.
The Saudi-U.S. defense cooperation is a perfect example. It was frozen after 2018, then boom, March 2025. A $142 billion package is initialed.
Including a civil nuclear component, which is huge.
It's massive, and it's direct state-to-state architecture. No back channels, no private brokers needed.
Which brings us back to that audacity we mentioned. The sources really highlight this when Ahmed al-Sharaa,
The leader of HTS.
right, the former designated terrorist, was received at the White House in February 2025. I mean, that's designed to shock.
It absolutely is. It demonstrates a total willingness to just override traditional diplomatic and intelligence vetoes to get what they want. It shows the difference in priorities.
The old guard was about long-term stability, managing reputations.
And the nationalists are all about transactional, immediate state gains. Even if it means normalizing former enemies and just tossing out decades of foreign policy protocol, the sources see it as a kind of brutal efficiency.
Okay, now let's bring this disruption home. Because the collapse of this old network wasn't just international. It created a massive domestic shock. Let's talk about the seismic event of Zohran Mamdani's mayoral victory in New York City, November 4th, 2025. The city's youngest mayor since LaGuardia and its first Muslim leader.
This was a battleground. The old system threw everything it had at him and still failed. You had former Governor Andrew Cuomo running this independent spoiler campaign.
Backed by billionaire money.
Explicitly. The entire established Democratic machine, the old power structures, they were all hostile. They just assumed they had a permanent veto over who could run that city.
And the amount of money against him was staggering. The sources actually quantify it.
They do. Real estate tycoons spend $11 million trying to paint his rent freeze proposals as this existential threat to the city's economy.
And then pro-Israel lobbying groups spent another $8 million, focusing almost entirely on his support for BDS and Palestine.
And on top of that, Donald Trump himself threatened to cut federal funds to the city if Mamdani won.
So that's nearly $20 million, plus institutional pressure, plus a presidential threat, all aimed at one local election.
Yeah.
And he still won.
He still won. And his victory is framed as this irrefutable proof of the limits of money and institutional muscle against a truly mobilized populist coalition.
And his winning template, it was simple but effective. It was this mix of granular economic populism, we're talking free buses, city-owned grocery stores, universal childcare.
Things that directly affect people's lives.
Exactly. And he combined that with these really unflinching internationalist positions, especially on Palestine. And he mobilized young people, working-class voters, Muslims, Latinos, everyone who was tired of the status quo.
The psychological shock in New York was profound. Wall Street, the old Democratic machine, they're reportedly in a state of crisis. Total reassessment.
Because they lost the veto.
They lost the veto they thought they'd always have over urban politics. It's a domestic financial veto that is structurally parallel to the geopolitical veto they lost in Tel Aviv and Washington.
So let's zoom out and connect the dots.
Yeah.
You've got Ehud Barak marginalized in Israel. You have Prince Andrew being dismantled in the UK. Maduro's financial lifelines are cut off in Caracas. And Cuomo and Wall Street lose control in New York City.
It's a clear pattern. The underlying system, this reliance on private access, closed-door deals, opaque influence, it's being rejected or dismantled everywhere all at once.
And the sources argue the core conflict isn't really left versus right.
No, it's not even about pure ideology. It's about how transnational influence is mediated.
Okay, explain that.
Is it mediated by these semi-autonomous private brokers in finance, academia, and intelligence? That was the old model, the centrist globalist model.
The one that relied on silence.
Exactly. Or is the world shifting back to an overt state-to-state hierarchy under the aegis of elected strongmen and hereditary monarchs? The sources contend the latter is winning, decisively.
Which is why the Epstein revelations are so much more than a scandal.
They're an obituary? They are the analytical obituary for that former model. 2025 is the moment that network lost the commanding heights of geopolitical influence because the public exposure of their methods made their only real currency discretion worthless.
So the struggle for global control is now, for the first time in decades, happening out in the bright, bold light of day. Which leaves you with a final thought to mull over. If that old system relied on silence and privacy to maintain its version of stability, what does it mean for global stability, for transparency, that the new system is inherently louder, more nationalist, and less embarrassed about using pure state power, and it's doing it all without any veil of hidden deals? That's the seismic shift you're left to watch as this old power map continues to get ripped up.
Until next time.